Welcome to the EMEA Recruitment podcast in partnership with Operation Smile, an international medical charity that provides free surgery to children and adults with cleft lip and palate. To support us in raising vital funds for this cause, please donate at emearecruitment.com/operation-smile. In this episode, we're joined by Simon Clementson, CHRO and Senior VP at Archroma. He explains the steps that HR professionals can take to become better business partners.
So hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment podcast in partnership with our good friends over at Operation Smile. So today, as my colleague Rose mentioned, we're delighted to welcome Simon onto the podcast today. So hopefully through modern technology, you're able to hear me okay, Simon?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you, Paul.
Perfect. Well, great to welcome you onto the show today. I know we've got a good list of questions to go through, some of which have come from my colleagues internally, and actually some have come from the network externally, people who we've got joint connections with. So hopefully it should be an interesting one for you and the listeners, but it shouldn't tax you too much with a bit of luck.
Okay, a bit of taxing is okay, but I hope it's of interest to your listeners, I'm sure.
Cool, perfect. Now, I know, obviously, I mentioned that the show is in partnership with Operation Smile. So they're a charity organisation that help children that are born with cleft lip and palate in developing countries. And so I always like to ask the guest a nice, light-hearted question to start the conversation. I mean, given that they're called Operation Smile, I was just wondering what the last thing was that made you smile, Simon.
Interesting one. I suppose one of the very few upsides of COVID has been the extra time I've had together with the family. I'm now based at home and had a lot more family interaction as a result, and that's been fantastic. Equally, one of the many downsides of COVID has been there's been much less opportunity to meet with friends in the way we used to. So I can honestly say the thing that's probably most made me smile recently is when I had the opportunity to meet up with 5 close friends that I'd not seen face to face for a long time, and we just had a hilarious time together, and it made me remember the power of those friendships and the missed opportunity we've had during COVID to do it. So that was great fun.
No, it's good to hear, and I think it is one of those things that one of the many challenges that COVID has brought around. But I think generally, even before the whole COVID situation, I think setting time aside to meet up with friends, it can always be challenging because you have the demands of work. You have obviously anyone with families and children, it always has the priority over meeting with friends. But I think it's one of the regrets people tend to have over the years if they don't put that time aside, partly because of what you mentioned. It makes you smile, it gives you a good laugh, and helps take your mind off things as well. I mean, anything else you do outside of work that helps take your mind off the day job?
Yes, I'm laughing because I'm sure some of your listeners will recognise that I'm a mammal, so I'm into my cycling. That's something I've really picked up over the last couple of years, having not done it for a few years, and I've got the bug now. So I've got the couple of expensive bikes, like every middle-aged man seems to have these days. But I really enjoy that, and that's been a good release, and obviously good for health as well. To get out and cycle, and I'm doing a couple of quite big challenges next year, a cycle ride in Italy called the Maratona, which will be very long and hard, so I need to do some training for that. It's kind of the cycling equivalent of doing a marathon, I guess.
Wow, okay, that's pretty impressive. Is this something that came up as a result of COVID, or have you always been into cycling?
I've always enjoyed it, but I had quite a long hiatus where I didn't do a lot of it because of work and family and all the other things you quite rightly mentioned. And, a couple of friends encouraged me to get back into it, and I've got the bug. So I'm out every weekend now and probably bore people stupid with it.
But it is good. I mean, usually I tend to ask people what they learned or developed in themselves over the whole COVID situation to try and put a positive spin on it. But it sounds like you've unearthed the answers to that question already. You really focused on the health and fitness and getting a lot more miles on the bike, albeit some of them indoors. It's still just that same focus and effort, and still has the same health benefits as if you're going outside. So it sounds. Would you say that's been the biggest let's say, plus for you maybe over the whole remote working and home working side of things?
I would say number one is the more time with the family, because previously I had quite a long commute and would be leaving the house, before the kids were up and getting back often at sort of near enough bedtime. And so having some more quality time and being able to participate in more family events has been a huge plus. But after that one, I would say the health thing, other than having caught COVID, unfortunately, and been quite unwell at one period and now recovered, I would say I'm a lot healthier as a result of the exercise. So yes, for sure.
No, and I know we were talking off air a bit about the COVID experience you've had recently. So yeah, really pleased that you're back to full fitness and full health now, because obviously it's a scary time. I'd imagine when you are diagnosed with that. So it's glad you've recovered from it and you're able to be even on the podcast today, really.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm absolutely full health now, but it's a sobering reminder that so many are still suffering with this. And of course, we've had many of our employees have unfortunately contracted it, and a small number have passed away over the last couple of years. So it reminds us of our responsibility to look after the well-being of our employees as well as our family and ourselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that you mentioned a bit about looking after people and taking responsibility for other individuals. And one of the things we're going to talk about, obviously, is your career progression and your path into the CHRO position. But I noticed one of the things that a lot of people say about you and the comments that we have on LinkedIn about your style and personality is that you're very people focused. And I suppose you would expect that being in the HR profession, but was that the reason you went into HR in the first place, or did HR choose you? Because we often find that people don't necessarily choose their careers choose them. So I was just wondering, as a starting point, what was it, the people angle that really got you into HR, or was it a chance situation that moved you in that direction?
Honestly, it was a chance situation. So when I graduated, I didn't already have a job lined up, and so I was doing some interim work for a short period. And one of those interims was at IBM, and I took the opportunity to introduce myself to I think it was the HR lady in Basingstoke, where I was doing the interim, and from that came two job offers actually, and one was in HR as a sort of graduate trainee, and another one was as a sales trainee. So there was very much a fork in the road for my career from the very outset, and I didn't perceive myself as likely to be in a sales career, and so I chose the HR route, and I've never looked back, never regretted it. On the contrary, it's been fantastic. So I wouldn't say it's because of a particular interest in people. I think it's an opportunity to certainly balance that important part of the business, but also I would see myself as interested in the commercial side of the role and being a member of the leadership team for the business, of which the people and HR function is a very important element. But I would represent that as part of the wider team, not just a people person. As you know, and as most HR generalists know, actually you have to do some quite tough things with people. In the HR role, we're often in the forefront of redundancies or performance terminations, or of course dealing with employees in difficult circumstances of bereavement or illness, and that can be quite upsetting. I think you need to have a balance of commerciality and an interest in the people agenda.
No, it's interesting because I know that also that comment also follows through on the on the comments about you as well. They're very commercially driven. Someone that shows a great deal of humility, and I think they're all great qualities you would expect to see in a senior level HR individual. But at the same time, they're the tough characteristics to do well. I think you've got to enjoy them to do them really well. I mean, so I was going to ask you really, what is it about the HR discipline that you really enjoy?
So, I mean, predominantly my HR career has been in the generalist field. I've done, centers of competence roles as well in, reward and talent and so forth. But predominantly I've been a generalist. And I think it's the not quite knowing what you're going to face each day. So everything's different. And of course, you have the normal processes that need to run, whether it be a salary process or a promotion round, and those things need to run fluently and professionally. But actually, it's the unusual things. It's the challenges for the business, either financial or when something happens to a location, an earthquake, or often the worst things for employees are the most professionally stimulating as an HR leader. And I like that difference and challenge and stimulation. And I also like that we can make a difference and handle those things in a respectful and professional way. And that's really valued by employees, even when it's the tougher things like a redundancy round or other bad news. I take pleasure from doing those in a way that our employees understand why we're doing it, and in an honest way and in a respectful way. And my experience has been if you handle it in that way, I've had a number of thanks from employees in the past, even though they've been on the sharp end of the decisions, because if you do it in the right way, it lands easier. And we see so many, examples in the press of, mass firings over Zoom or sort of text message dismissals. And, it shouldn't take a genius to work out that creates so much bad blood and is unnecessarily harsh. That everyone should learn the lessons of do it in the right, respectful way, and the employees that stay behind will value that also, because they'll feel they would be treated in the same way if it were to happen to them in the future.
Hi everybody, it's Paul Thomas here. I hope that you're well and you're enjoying the podcast so far. Thank you once again for your continued support listening to the podcast. I just wanted to break into the recording to talk to you about a really exciting partnership that EMEA Recruitment has along with Operation Smile. And as founder of EMEA Recruitment, it's an honour and a privilege to announce this partnership. Personally, I was born with a cleft lip and palate, so the mission of Operation Smile is something that I have a strong personal connection with. It's not an understatement to say that the dentists and surgeons that helped me were life changers. It's not only about the actual operations that take place, the support and care post and pre-operation are beyond value, and from personal experience I can only say that I'd not be the confident, happy person I am today without this support. I want to help children experience the support and care and skill that I experienced on my journey, and hope that we can do this along with Operation Smile. Every 3 minutes, a child is born with a cleft lip or cleft palate, and the mission of Operation Smile is to provide help and support to these children through providing 6,000 medical volunteers across 80 countries who are dedicated to help these children with facial conditions, most commonly cleft lip and cleft palate. More than 200,000 children are born with a cleft every year, and they are often unable to speak, eat, socialise or even smile. However, it can take as little as 45 minutes and cost just €180 or 182 francs for Operation Smile to provide a child with life-changing surgery. Now, in partnership with Operation Smile, EMEA Recruitment is raising valuable funds and aiming to create 100 new smiles to support the organisation to provide free surgeries for children and young adults all over the world. Please help us by donating through the link in the bio, or get in touch to see how your company can help get involved too. For the moment, I'll leave you to carry on listening to the rest of the podcast, but if there's anything I can do in terms of answering any questions or finding out how you can help and support EMEA Recruitment and Operation Smile, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
No, it's really interesting, and I think from speaking to other people, whether it's on the podcast or just generally, I think the people-focused way of working is something that's, I think the majority, if not all people, feel is the best way of working and the way to continue going. But we have these other influences in our lives now, BI and data, and as you mentioned, social media and so on is. The huge impacts on our lives at work and at home. So it just leads me on to a question I was going to ask in relation to BI and data. I mean, how do you see the impact of that affecting the HR function in the future?
I think it can be a huge positive. I've probably been on a journey myself of becoming more data-driven as I move into more senior roles and as I develop, because you understand the power of it. And you've always got to balance it with some management instinct. I mean, that's why we're paid, is for our judgment and our, hopefully making decisions off the back of it. But the more they can be data-driven, the better they are. And I'm really quite excited and borderline nerdy about the opportunity of predictive analytics in HR, where you start to use your history of data from your HR systems and financial systems to be able to predict what might happen. So it is perfectly possible, if you've got the right data, to predict who is likely to resign. So if you do the algorithms on when they last had a promotion, when they last had a pay rise, how long they've been in their job, their age, et cetera, et cetera. If you smash all those together, you can have a pretty good outcome of, are they likely to resign in the next year? So this is, I think, a growing opportunity for us in HR to look into the power of that. And as you know, if you can bring insights into the leadership team and new perspectives and new information, that creates a very good proactive discussion that can help you make better business decisions. So I'm excited about it, and I think it's still quite nascent in our industry, but it will grow very quickly over the next few years, I think.
Now, you talked a bit there also about being in the leadership team and making decisions and helping on bigger picture issues. And obviously, as Rose mentioned at the start, you're now in the position of CHRO and Senior Vice President at Archroma. So I thought I'd ask you what it feels like really to be in this position at the moment, Simon.
Gosh, I mean, it's an honour, right, to have a senior role and a leadership position in the executive committee at a company like Archroma. It's professionally very exciting. We're quite a young company. We've just had our 8th birthday of being created, and so there's quite a lot of green field. Frankly, of putting in place better ways of working and better structures and clearer processes, so we don't have a big history of all those things that you just need to fiddle with, that we can create some new things, which is professionally very exciting and opportunity for growth. I think I also would want to mention that I feel a responsibility to our employees. We've got nearly 3,000 employees, for their safety and well-being, and that's been very acute, of course, during COVID, but also we have 25 plus manufacturing sites, and the day-to-day safety of those sites weighs on me as a responsibility of a leader, and of course for their careers. And lastly, I'd say I'm excited about our role in making our company and our industry more sustainable. So we're in a specialty chemicals business, which is by definition not particularly green. But we are leading, I think, that change to make it more sustainable in terms of our products, in terms of how they're used, and in terms of waste water management. There are so many ways that we can make this more sustainable, and I'm proud that Archroma is in the forefront of changing the industry, particularly in the fashion and textiles, which is one of the most polluting industries in the world, and perhaps is not recognised as such very widely.
No, it was really interesting. And on that sustainability side, is there any more information in terms of what you've done and the business has done in that area?
So it's about selecting different chemicals, of course, for solutions. So one that we often talk about is in the creation of denim. That is a very dirty process, particularly when it's using aniline. So we have an aniline-free solution. It uses huge amounts of water. I probably get it wrong, 2,000 litres of water per pair of jeans or more. It's a shocking amount. And we have A, this aniline-free solution, and B, a system solution. So it's not just the chemicals used at one point of dyeing, but the whole production process. And if you get that right, you can reduce at every level, and it compounds the savings. So those are examples of how we do it, and a clear focus on wastewater management, particularly in countries where water is a more scarce resource, where we have some manufacturing in Pakistan or so forth, where we can make a real difference to the local community by managing our water usage carefully and responsibly.
No, it's really, really interesting, because I think it links in also to something you mentioned earlier as well, trying to spot when people might be on the verge of resigning, because I think the whole challenge that many companies have these days is retaining great people. And I think, if companies have these strong values and ethics, and they have these strong structures in place that you mentioned earlier, then that not only helps with retaining people, but also recruiting people as well. But I think that it has to be something that is running through the business. And I always feel that's one of the toughest challenges for people in HR, to try and change mindsets of people, whereas in other disciplines, if you're looking to change a way of working, then or to learn a new skill, then that can be done over a relatively short period of time. But to change mindsets and to change cultures of businesses is obviously something that takes a while, So I think, the whole sustainability, diversity and inclusion, all these big programs that are out there now to help with values and ethics of companies, it's something that HR is really at the center of in the companies that are doing it well. I mean, I just wondered whether you've seen the impact of these things within recruitment and retention as well.
Yes, very, very explicitly. I mean, as you can imagine, I do quite a lot of interviews, particularly for our senior roles. And I can honestly say that every single person I've interviewed over the last couple of years has read our sustainability report that we publish online each year, and has asked about it. And I think it's moving from being something that some people are interested in to being the majority of people are interested in, and moving from a nice to have to a business prerogative. We're doing it because it's good business sense as well as being the right thing to do. And having had, I think, a demonstrable track record of sustainability over a few years, already since our creation, I think we can authentically say this is not a bandwagon we've jumped on. It's something we've been pushing and now are keen to continue accelerating and be in a leadership position on. And absolutely, that comes up in every recruitment conversation.
And I mean, this is obviously it's a change project, if I can call it that. So we're trying to change the mindset and shape of businesses. But I know over the years you've had a lot of experience in change management in this type of area, but also more generally. So I mean, what do you think makes a successful change management process? Because it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's not easy to do from a HR perspective. So I thought I'd use the time with you to see if you maybe also offer any insights into that, really.
I'm happy to give some thoughts. I mean, I think the first thing is I try to communicate in any business I'm in that the change management shouldn't be a sort of shock that we're having every now and then. Right? It shouldn't feel like something you're just doing and then you'll move on and you'll do something else, because it's coming thick and fast, and it's now the norm. Right? It used to be maybe you do restructuring every few years, but now it seems to be every year that we make some changes, because we have to be more agile, we have to adjust to what customers need and what the market demands are. And I think psychologically, we just need to land with our employees that expect change to be regular. And so I would prefer a model of continuous improvement than a series of change processes, because I think that's easier to accept and more realistic in this day and age. And, I would always counsel leaders not to say, we'll do this change and then that'll be it. We won't do anything more for a period of time. You can't make those promises. Better to set an expectation of continuous improvement and continuous change. So I think with that mindset, that's the starting point. When it comes to the actual process, I mean, clearly you need a clear rationale for change. And sometimes I've seen a tendency we need to change because business results need to improve. And you start from that position, and then you go, well, what do we change? I think it probably needs to come from what's our problem, what's our opportunity, and then you can articulate that rationale much more clearly. And I think a good acid test is, can you articulate the rationale for change to all your stakeholders, whether it be your shareholders or your owners, your board, your leadership team, your employees, your customers, and your market? And if you can't express that clearly, you've probably not got it right, because one of the other learnings, of course, you need to communicate and to do that as openly as possible. And my learning is if you fail to communicate, or you communicate only bits, then people assume the worst, right? They're not telling us because it's the worst case scenario. Right. So the more you can communicate, the more you can set people's minds at rest. And I always give the example of, if you're waiting for a plane and it's delayed, and they don't tell you why it's delayed or any kind of realistic, it's much more stressful than if they say, look, we're having to change the plane. It's going to take 3 hours, sit back, right? They say half an hour delayed, and then in half an hour's time, another half an hour delayed. That lack of knowledge, lack of understanding is very stressful. And if you compound that up to an organizational change, that's exactly what employees go through. They feel they're not being trusted, they're being lied to. So the more open and honest you can be, the more accepting they can be, I think, of the change.
I mean, do you think a lot of what you mentioned there, you say being open and honest, dealing with stakeholders and looking to continually improve rather than having a one massive project and then a couple of years later having another one? I mean, it seems a lot of this is related to being a very strong business partner. I mean, is that what you'd relate that back to?
I hope so, because all of these things are in service of better business performance, right? That is our driver. And I've worked for commercially driven organizations. I've not worked for in the charity sector. Obviously, your focus is different. But in commercially driven organizations where we have shareholders and boards and obviously private equity, as we are now, we are driven by better performance. And I also believe that is good for employees, because everyone wants to be part of a successful organization, because then you've got more chance for growth. You obviously have better bonuses, better growth opportunities as an individual. So it's a win-win. It shouldn't be that the business succeeds and employees don't. We all grow together. So I think that's what I push for, is that environment of success and winning and growth works for everyone. And sometimes the route to that is through difficult decisions, which might be to make some redundancies or to close a location or a factory. And that's really tough for the individuals impacted by that. Of course, I understand that. I've been in the sharp end of doing that many times, but it's in the service of the greater good for the organization and for the other employees.
I mean, obviously, you talked a bit about your background. I mean, even going back to when you had, when you were younger and you had the two opportunities of HR or sales, to which directions go in. But what has been a bit of a theme through your answers so far, it is the commercially minded individual, and obviously someone who is very good at working with people and listening to the challenges of your partners. And I just wondered, obviously this kind of the characteristics you have, they don't necessarily come naturally to everybody, and what often one of the big challenges we often hear people in HR tell us about, but also people outside of HR when they're talking about their relationship with HR, is that the business relationship isn't always there, So if you're, let's say you're somebody who's in HR in a business partner role and looking to, let's say, emulate what you've done in your career to become a CHRO, do you think there's any steps people can take to become stronger and better business partners? Is there anything particular that you think a strong business partner really should have, and how they can develop those skills?
I think the magic for an HR business partner is having a foot in both camps, if you like, of being the leader of the HR agenda, but also a member of the leadership team, as I hope I've emphasised in this. And those aren't always conflicting things, but sometimes they are. And it's having a foot in both camps is the dark art, I guess, of being an HR business partner. Clearly, the chemistry and the relationship you have with the particular business leader, who's typically your main partner, and that leadership team is also the entry to influence and adding value, right? Because if you don't have that relationship, you don't have the trust, then you won't have the voice in the room, and you won't have the influence and bring your ideas and value to the table. So that chemistry test, and that won't always be there. And maybe sometimes you need to recognize that we don't get on with everyone, And sometimes the chemistry is not there, and it's probably better to recognize that and move on if that's the case. You can work it a little bit, but to have a relationship where you can speak openly and honestly and be a confidant of the leader, I think that's something I've really valued. Is leadership can be a lonely place, as all leaders know, and having someone who can be their touchstone or trusted confidant so they can talk things through with HR. I think that's a unique position we hold in the organization, and one which I've cherished that trust in the past. And I guess in more practical terms, being ensure you understand the key drivers of the business as an HR leader, and not just drive the HR agenda. So understand the impact on the P&L. What are the impact that we can make as HR leaders and contribute to those overall business results. And I think if you speak in that language, that helps your credibility and influence at that table.
No, you mentioned P&L there, and that was another thing I was going to bring up at some point today as well, because again, when I was looking at some of the comments that people have written about you on, it was actually on LinkedIn. One of the comments was that around P&L and your solid understanding of P&L and the business, and it's not, I suppose, a common thing I tend to see written when I'm looking at recommendations of HR people. Obviously the focus is more around people and changing systems related to HR than the P&L side. So are you naturally someone who's good with numbers, or did that take you a bit of time to develop on that side?
No, I wouldn't say I'm naturally good at numbers. I would say my maths O-level is probably one of the exam results I'm most proud of. But I think I probably do myself a disservice. So obviously I understand it. I think it's more about understanding the business drivers and the contribution you can make, and not, perhaps we're guilty occasionally of, being an advocate for employees or for a round of salary increases or a bonus one. But it's understanding how that fits together with the affordability and realistic budgeting for the year, because it's such a large cost element in almost any business is the people cost. And something you can make a very tangible difference, therefore, to the business results by managing that in the right way. And that doesn't mean necessarily, that's not a euphemism for squeezing employee costs down to as low as possible, because obviously you've got to balance that with retention and motivation. So, but doing that in the context of the overall business results, and knowing when and where to make a case for investment and when and where to hold back because the company's not in a position to do that. I think is the art, is to find a balance and the timing and the proportionality, and that has to be driven by business results. No,
and I think within that, obviously, you mentioned about really through the podcast, everything we're talking about has had a link back to people and relationships and building trust and so on with the people around you. And I know one of the things that you have a bit of a passion for is developing talent. So I think linking a lot of what we said in the podcast today with this question, really, I mean, what do you think have been some of the key steps that you followed that have helped you to develop talent in companies you've worked at? Well,
I'll share my mantra that anyone who's worked with me will know on this is, in any talent development process, there isn't a box where magic happens, right? And I've worked for a lot of big corporates where perhaps the focus is too much on completing the process and less on the outcomes. We sort of pat ourselves on the back for completing 9-box grids, or we've got our succession plans all in place, and then the risk is it becomes shelfware. Right, you've done the exercise, you think you've done the work. Actually, the value, of course, comes in the discussions with the employees, and importantly, following through on the action plans, because otherwise it is just shelfware and it'll be out of date in a month and no good will come of it. So to get the very clear ownership of the line manager and the employee together to own the career and the discussion, and not just to complete a kind of HR-driven process around talent development or succession, because that's just a facilitation. So I would say less process, more action would be my mantra, and to make sure we include the employees in the discussion in an honest way, because so many employees, I think, are perhaps under the impression that they have a higher potential than they have, that can come crashing down at a certain point. Better to say if there's gaps, and then how do we address them, and to build it up. And all too often in succession, we've got some good people, but when it comes to the selection, we say, well, they haven't got this talent or they haven't got that experience. Well, that's a failure of ours as an organization in not developing that so they're ready when the moment comes. And that comes from that thoughtful discussion of their skills and experience, an action plan, and following through on the action plan. Of course, you need a bit of process and a bit of structure to do that in an organized and proper way. But the ownership and the follow through on the actions is what I would press very hard.
No, interesting, because I think as you say there, and it's come up earlier on as well. Retaining and developing talent is central to successful businesses, and the better companies are at that, then the better talent they tend to attract as well when they are looking to bring new people in. It's so visible these days on various platforms. It's very easy to see which companies are looking after their people by the retention and the career progression that they offer. But I think a large part of it also comes down to getting the right people in the business in the first place. So, given obviously we're on the recruitment podcast, so the conversation of recruitment had to come up at some stage. So I just was wondering how you feel a really efficient and effective recruitment process should work.
Yes, of course. I suppose first off, I'd say clarity on the role and the skills and experience needed. It sounds like a kind of a bit of an HR push that to have a job description or the kind of skills and experience. I think sometimes those are done perhaps on a slight tick box approach. That they're done for a reason, and it's because you need to be clear what you're looking for, and therefore to be able to brief a recruitment partner to get out there. Equally, a bit of flexibility in that, particularly to encourage and enable diverse candidates. So I know, typically some people will approach a job description and say, well, I haven't got 2 of the 10 requirements, therefore I won't apply. Others will say, well, I didn't even read it, I just applied for the job. So we need to write those descriptions in a gender neutral way, particularly, or in a culturally neutral way. And then when it comes to selection, I think you do need some structure in your selection process, ideally, whether that be a structured interview or an exercise they need to participate in, particularly for those roles that require some harder skills. But it must always be balanced with some management judgment. That gut feel, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we pay and employ individuals for their judgment, their knowledge, and their decision making. And I think you have to allow some of that in a selection process. And then, finally, I'd say to balance the need for soft skills as well as hard skills. And those soft skills are probably a bit harder to assess, whether it's emotional intelligence or other soft skills, but they are so crucial to the performance of so many jobs that needs to be part of that selection criteria, if you like, overtly.
Yeah, no, and I think some of the things you mentioned there, I think really, really important. I think a lot of companies tend to miss. I think you mentioned there having as much as possible a strong process in place where you've got a clear definition of the role, but allowing for some flexibility. But at least 80% of the profile you want, and that it gets communicated in the right way. I think the long-term employer brand is at the center of this. If you can, even if people don't get the job, at least if they're seeing it work in the right way, then they can be a future person for a future job. And if, as long as they're left with a good image of the business and a good feeling for the brand, then they'll keep coming back. Which I think is really, really important. But I think also you mentioned the job descriptions in a gender neutral language, and that's something that I think still a lot of companies, certainly in the international markets, are not doing as much of. And I think it's really interesting to see the results of it. And I think you do see that this approach works. I think LinkedIn now has an algorithm where if you tick the right box, it will put one job profile on that is more will focus more men with the language in the job, and then you'll have one job profile which can approach for more women, and different wording and language attracts people in different ways. So it's really interesting to see how the industry is changing really, and using technology to do it.
Yes, and that awareness is the first step in addressing the gender bias or indeed any other bias that are around disability or culture or nationality or sexual preference. I think the HR community is doing well to raise that awareness and to make the changes to the recruitment process to make it more neutral and fair. I think there's still a way to go, and I'm sure we have a way to go. And we have a very clear ambition around, being a welcoming and diverse and inclusive organisation. But lots more we can do on that in the future, and it kind of starts in many ways with this, bringing in the talent in the first place and retaining our diverse talent that we have today, because that's clearly a lot easier than finding new talent.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I think, as you say, there's a lot of work still to be done on this area. But you do see most companies at least trying to do the right thing. But I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. That's one of the it's the challenges I think the HR discipline has often more than others. That to change, you can change maybe the company ethics and values on a spreadsheet and put it and market it. But the reality is that if the people in the business are not bought into it, then nothing will change. So it's a long-term challenge maybe of HR to keep that momentum going and to keep the people believing that it's the right thing to do. So I think that, and you're starting to see that happen as well, which is really good. I know we started the podcast with a humorous question, and so I thought I'd end it with something a bit lighthearted as well. And I know we've talked a bit about your career path, where we see the future of HR and how you got into it in the first place. But I thought I'd just ask you if there was one thing you wish you'd known at the beginning of your career, what that thing might be, and what you would pass on to the listeners on that side.
The benefit of hindsight. I suppose when I entered the workplace, I'm trying to think what year it was, probably 1989. And I joined a big organization. I joined IBM, and I would say the job for life or kind of loyalty was still quite prevalent then in the marketplace. And I come from a family where both my parents had jobs for life. So one was a teacher, one was an army officer, and so I guess that was the norm. Looking back, I might well have moved jobs a little more frequently, and I know this is something that later generations have done more naturally, because I think you get a lot of learning, you get a lot of growth and stimulation from moving organizations. Frankly, I probably would have made more money in my career if I moved more often. But I know that's not advice I would want to give, because I don't want our employees to start jumping ship. But I guess that's the honest advice is, you probably do learn a bit more by changing organizations, and you probably earn a little bit more making those jumps, particularly earlier in career. Mm-hmm. But I don't regret any of the decisions, because I had wonderful opportunities and wonderful experiences in all the companies I've worked for. But that would probably be the one thing I would change.
No, I mean, you do see this trend now with the younger generations now. It's quite rare to see somebody commit for a longer period, but let's say 5 years plus with any one business. I mean, every couple of years it's seen now as the thing to do to change companies, and that, I think it makes it harder. Going back to what we've been talking about, retaining great people, because while certainly in my generation it was always you should try and stay with that company and promote, keep pushing for promotion internally as much as possible. But that mindset has changed a bit, which it is what it is, and I think it makes it more challenging for companies to think of different ways to retain the great people they have. But it sounds like Archroma are doing all the right things on that side.
Well, we're moving in that direction, I hope. I mean, just a last thought. There's another thing that's really changed is, I think there used to be a huge taboo about not currently being in a job when you're applying for a job, or having a break, if you like, on your CV. So certainly when I started working, that was a big thing. You'd almost automatically throw a CV into the reject pile if it was somebody who wasn't currently in a role. I really think that taboo has largely disappeared. Partly because it's more normal to change jobs more frequently, partly because mass redundancies can impact anyone any day, or insolvencies. And of course, in COVID, people have taken very different personal decisions and have different motivators and drivers, and have, in some cases opted out and wanting a change of career or of industry. So, I guess I would offer that olive branch to anyone who's in that situation is, I don't think it is a taboo anymore. And, don't feel like you need to cover it up in a recruitment process. Just talk about it openly and what you've learned from it and your enthusiasm for the future. Because anyone could be in that situation. So to take heart.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think it's, you see how it's changed over the years. And I think, the worst thing you can do is to try and cover it up, because then, it has almost a negative connotation that you're trying to hide something. Actually, I think, as you say, now it's much more acceptable for people to take time out and for whatever reason it might be. And I think as long as people can tell the story around why they've done it and what they've taken from it, then it's seen as a positive thing, actually, in many cases. So no, it's good. A good point on that side. And as I say, I mean, it's been great to have you as a guest on the podcast today, Simon. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I know the network will take a lot from this, and as have I. And I think if any of the network want to reach out to you to connect directly, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, I guess the easiest way these days is LinkedIn. You can message on that, and we can connect if necessary, or if helpful to folks. I hope there's one or two nuggets that people may have taken. I'm sure much will be known to many of our HR colleagues, but certainly happy to connect. And it's been a pleasure for me too. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak. No
problem at all. Well, huge thanks again, Simon. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll catch up again soon.
Likewise. Thank you, Paul.
Perfect. Thank you. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. If you'd like to reach out to Paul or myself, please feel free to send a connection through on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to listen to previous episodes of the podcast, you can find them all at our website, www.emearecruitment.eu.